I declare this the 8th ordinary meeting of the 175th session of the Literary and Scientific Society duly constituted, and invite the Secretary to read the minutes of the last meeting.
Hello, boys and girls. Are we sitting comfortably? Good. See me in my office afterwards. Shut up. Would you like to share it with the rest of the class, Mr. Kieran?
I like the suit. It's very fashionable.
I like the. No, I don't like anything about you. On the 29th of February 2024, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 17th ordinary meeting of the 175th session to debate the motion, "This House regrets the American Revolution." As usual, the meeting began with announcements. President Toft awarded President Emeritus McSparren a portrait. Quote, "I hope it takes form in your mantle," end quote. He then raised the RIV at the end of March. Misha Gerard raised the Dufferin. Oh, that's tonight, yes, if you haven't realised. You can find about it online or approach her. Dermot Hamill, HLM, mentioned the conversazione and said that you should pay at least £35 for it.
You should.
Ella Griffiths begged people to pay £5 for membership. Following reading of the minutes, which actually came before that, the meeting moved to private members' business. Luke Duffy raised the issue of UCD Literary and Historical Society stealing our homework, end quote. Responses were heard from Luke, Anthony, Patrick Maguire. That was all. Noah Barnley raised the issue of Lee Anderson. Responses were heard from Max Kieran, Dermot Hamill, and Misha Gerard, who made a remark that I'm not going to quote. Max Kieran raised the issue of the Rochdale by-election. Responses were heard from Baldy and Brian Hoey, HLM. Then President's questions took place. Max Kieran raised the issue of the podium, which is there's a reason why I'm not setting the laptop on the podium, because it will collapse and break my laptop. To quote, the quote was, quote, "buy a new one." Tom, would you like to propose anything from your family's store?
A great list of things.
Oh, good. Jacqueline Bonner expressed joy at the return of ties to the society. Quote, "This is one from Harrods, but a charity shop." Jack Steele had held that tie before, unless it was a good tie. It's the only tie in the city that he doesn't actually own. And then this question was further raised by Max Kieran, who asked, "How does it feel to own a tie that Jack Steele didn't want?" The President responded, quote, "He has at least 500. Okay, Imelda Marcos. Anyways, Dermot Hamill, HLM, asked the President what his favourite Belfast nightclub was, and it was, quote, "The Bad Place." Noah Barney then asked the President who he would have voted for in Rochdale. The response was no. After President's questions, a vote in prior opinion took place. There were 9 votes for the ayes, 19 votes for nay, and 8 abstentions. So, if my maths isn't wrong, the opposition had it. First in the proposition was Max Kieran. Quote, "What has democracy ever done for us?" End quote. He expressed his desire to critique and take apart the American Revolution. We must go back to history to find out about it. And a lot of what he said was just stuff I told him in oh no, I'm not allowed to say that. The 7 Years' War was the catalyst of the war in America, and the Americans helped cause it. Foreshadowing occurred a lot. The war bankrupted Great Britain, and there was a need to get money from wealthy individuals. And he announced that they would not push further than the Appalachian Mountains. America took matters into their own hands, and the American Revolution saw bad things happen, but they got independence and taxes were doubled. First in the opposition was Luke Duffy. "Insurrectionism is a great and sacred right." A statement that has taken on a different meaning in the last few years. And nevertheless, he brought up Lockean values, which I wrote the word after. Rejection of mercantilism hurt our economy. And then there was discussion of slavery and the Stamp Act and the standing armies as well. Issues that no one besides me and about 2 other people understand. The British then shut down local governments, and then there was a quote from the Marquis de Lafayette, and then fighting for future liberties. It was at this point that the debate sort of went a bit like the car at the end of Thelma and Louise off the side of a cliff. And we're currently just about to hit the ground. Second, the proposition was Henry Riordan. Quote, "Imagine you lived in a society where you can't vote or have economic affairs. Evil ideas are spreading everywhere. Land of the free, so long as you are a wasp." And there was discussion of slavery and manifest destiny. Were the US such a staunch moral leader over the issue of slavery? And then it was stated that the US abolished slavery 150 years after Britain. Now, Britain abolished slavery in 1833, and if we do maths, by that logic, we can all thank President Reagan for abolishing slavery in 1983. The French Revolution would have never happened without this, and at this point I'm sort of going like that on the table, because it's gone, and then slavery, manifest destiny. A maiden speaker on the second proposition was Justin Tukowski. We would all be speaking German if the prop had their way, he argued. The British wished to maintain the fair trade, and the US has supported self-determination around the world. Stop the scourge of communism, was shouted. Quote, we had to make tough choices with certain countries around the world. He brought up nuclear bombs in a debate about an era of muskets, and, quote, America provided a great opportunity for the Irish. The US is the world's sole policeman, and the powers of the US military helped the world without any doubt. Another maiden speaker was third for the proposition, Adam Wilson. He conceded the revolution led to our modern democratic values. However, there was a shortage of workers, which led to the emergence of slavery. The US possesses a dark economic history, and then I've written the words linen and cotton in capital letters here, so that meant something important was said. Blood-stained economy. The US is a new empire. Pax Americana. Slavery was only abolished in 1865, as opposed to 1983. And Andrew Jackson. Another maiden speaker was third speaker for the opposition, Colton Taussig. I've got that name right? Yeah? Oh, good. Quote, is everyone ready? Let's begin, he then smirked. He began by quoting Thomas Jefferson. The war was necessary to stop British tyranny. Famine doesn't mean revolution. The British emancipation had to overcome the opposition of the West Indian planters. Only way to keep pace was to satiate the slave traders. Quote, I apologise about slavery, end quote. If America was under British rule, there would have been much greater of a slave lobby. Emancipation had to stop somewhere. And then he said another quote, but I'm not quoting that in polite conversation. Nope. The final speaker for the proposition was Jonathan Massey. Quote, America is bad, end quote. So true. I'd like to talk about slavery. And then he just decided to talk about the Mayflower instead. Nothing of value was said. The final speaker for the opposition was Ben Wilson. All nations and all states have committed sin. America is held to it because of their conditions. Quote, you lot are a bunch of shifty rabbits, end quote. This was never divulged the meaning of this. And then there's some discussion about the SSE arena. And then he said he's not going to wear a hat. And then there's mention of Nazi Germany, something that comes up every week here. And death tolls. The French Revolution resulted in death, true. And then he started to walk around hunched over a bit like Gollum and Quasimodo. Questions were heard from Luke Anthony, Patrick Maguire, Dermot Hamill, HLM, and Ciara Swale, regretfully. Following the debate and questions in the House, the vote and speakerability took place. There were 19 votes for the proposition, 12 for the opposition, and 10 abstentions, so the proposition had it. Can I take the minutes as read?
Aye.
Not going to lean on this week because it'll probably collapse. But good evening, members of the House, and welcome to the Literific's annual Dufferin Competition for the best Speaker of the House. Can I first start by welcoming and thanking all participants for taking part. The competition has run for many years, and we're delighted to have it return this year with 8 speakers who are all fine debaters and have contributed this term. To give an overview, there'll be 3 speakers winning tonight. One speaker will get the Dufferin Award for the best individual speaker, named after former Society patron Lord Dufferin, and one team comprising of 2 speakers will get the Shannon Award for the best team, named after President Emeritus Paul Shannon, who refounded the Literific. He was only aware that an award was named after him when he returned last year and shared it, and he wasn't actually told previously that the award was named after him, but there we go. The Dufferin is slightly different to our normal chamber debates. It's a team-based debate. Each of the participants here are in teams and must work with their teammate as part of the debate. The participants will be marked in accordance with a mark scheme that has been set out and that all speakers have had advanced sight of. The debate will be judged by our panel of former Literific presidents: Tara, president of the 166th session, Calvin, president of the 169th session, and Daniel, briefly president of the of the 173rd session. Can I thank them for agreeing to judge the competition and welcome them all back to the society. Participants will get 15 minutes to prepare for the debate and have not had advanced sight of the motion. Whilst they prepare, we'll conduct private members' business and the vote of prior opinion as normal. Before we get any further, do we have any council announcements? Camel?
I am your social officer, rather than who hasn't cleared out that yet, or hasn't said any of my other position. So, on the 25th of March, we have our annual conference. That's our formal, for those that don't speak Italian. in the Ulster Reform Club, again on the 25th of March. Tickets are £35 for members and £40 for non-members. So you might as well buy your membership at a fiver. It's a really nice card, I think. If you have any left, you guys get a nice card. You get discounts on things and on your formal President Emeriti, guest chair, all of you, you're all very welcome to purchase tickets. You're very welcome to join. I don't get a ticket at free, I don't know the deal. Please purchase tickets. We'll also be going to Lavery's after the debate, and depending on how much wine we have left, possibly staying behind to finish that. If there's no wine left behind for me afterwards, there will be a swift copy of violence. So please leave at least one glass of wine.
Thank you. Do we have any more?
Money. But yeah, as Dermot was saying, if you do want to make your comments about seeing tickets tonight, I have a cash box with me and membership, so you can do it in cash if you want. We don't have any cards, sorry, so you get a £5 discount. So.
We do have cards, but they're at my house. I'll give you them.
Okay. We don't have cards tonight, but we will in the future. Thank you.
Then on Monday the doors open at 6:30, but the evening will start at 7 p.m. We have Sir Robert Buckland, who is chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee in the House of Commons. He's also former Justice Secretary, coming to talk to us in the Canada room in the Lanyon building. So go through the Lanyon, go to the left, and up the stairs. Unfortunately, there'll be no wine, but there will be tea and coffee, which is a bit more civilised. And it'll be a lit talk hosted by head of the Scoop, Claire Dixon. And after he's made his speech and after he's been interviewed, members of the audience will get the chance to put questions to him. So please do come along to that. And if you go into the Literific's Instagram bio, you can fill the form out just so we know the numbers, and then we can go from there. And then additionally, the IV, the Literific's IV, which is a rhetoric-based IV, so like this, is being held on the 23rd and 24th of March in Belfast City Hall, which that's now been confirmed. We're looking to put forward as many of our own teams as possible, and we have teams right across the island of Ireland, and hopefully a team from Ulster coming along to that. So if you want to take part in our own IV in Belfast over the weekend, please do let me, I guess, know, or Dermot, given Finton isn't here.
That's also open to President Emeriti, so you're very welcome. Mr. Crawley, you can speak to it if you'd like.
And then
That's great.
I just want to reiterate what Dermot said about Conversazione. Please buy your ticket as soon as you can. That'll be a good evening. But now back to the Dufferin. For this evening, we have a guest chair for the competition, and we're delighted to have William Crawley here in the chair. He's a BBC journalist and presenter of both Sunday on Radio 4 and Talkback. He has kindly agreed to chair the debate, and we're delighted to have him here this evening. Without further ado, I'd like to invite William up to make some opening remarks and, crucially, announce the motion for this evening's debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I can paraphrase Joe Biden, I don't know why I'm here. It's been a long time since I've been in anything approaching a debating society here, but I was once the vice president of the Union Debating Society. Less said about that, the better. There was a hiatus in the history of the Literific. It disappeared for a while. It was replaced by the Union Debating Society. I'm not sure we kept, you're researching this for a book, I'm not sure we kept minutes, but I doubt anyone ever kept minutes as exhaustingly comprehensively as the minutes we've heard tonight. I was looking forward to this evening until I heard those minutes, and then it sounded like Elon Musk's timeline in front of me. And thanks for your intervention, by the way, the social officer. I mean, you've got a style. I'll give you that. I mean, it's the dark clothes, the irrepressibly threatening invitational style you have. I'm looking forward to the conversazione. But look, I'm here really because I want to encourage you, because I always enjoyed debating societies, and I've always thought that they were a really important part of my university experience, and I think yours too. And in fact, as important in many ways for the career that I've developed. I've been working for the BBC now for 20 years. And I've made lots of TV documentaries, I've made lots of radio programs, and I have a daily show which is all about debate. So it's kind of perfect for me. I've sort of lucked out, really. And even what you're doing tonight with this kind of think on your feet approach to debate is what I do for a living, you know, because I could be sitting there live on the radio, voice in my ear says, this person will be appearing, some politician, whatever, do your interview straight away, and there you go. So you've got to go for it. You've got to be able to go for it straight away. We know from recent research that those who have been able to be successful in life and in their careers, but also in life, have developed verbal fluency. Verbal skills are really important. When they walk into a job, and it doesn't matter how great your CV is, by the way, it's great if you have a great CV, but if you don't have verbal fluency when you sit down, if you don't have natural confidence, it'll stand against you. And these kinds of societies really develop, and drama sulks and other kinds of opportunities do, really develop verbal fluency, an ability to be comfortable in your own skin, in your own voice, in your own space, to think for yourself, to pause and be comfortable with pausing in speech. That can be a very powerful thing, as you know. To use humor, to engage critical skills. And this is a very important part of my job. To be able to spot fallacies, critical, false entries and dead ends, and be able to call them up to someone, and to conjure analogies that, in a rhetorical way, can turn an argument in a different direction. Lord Dufferin understood that. He was president of the Oxford Union. In its day, the world's most famous debating society. They still claim that, but who knows? And he's a fascinating person. I made a TV documentary about him. I went to Canada. Some of you will have seen his statue at the side of the City Hall in Belfast. And he was the Governor General of Canada. Before that, he had been the ambassador to France. He had been the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, based in what was then called Constantinople or Istanbul today, and then became Viceroy of India. And if you go, as I did, to Quebec City, you can walk along Dufferin Terrace, which is one of the legacies of Lord Dufferin there. There are cities named after him in various parts of the world. There are counties named after him in various parts of the world. He's not as well known here, in fact, as he is in other places. But when, in the 19th century, this society came into existence, those who were here would certainly have known of the reputation of Lord Dufferin. Now, I'm not defending aristocracy by any means, or inherited wealth, or empire, or imperial politics. He was born into all of that, and he inherited his place in life. So he had advantages which those from my background, for example, growing up in North Belfast in a working class paramilitarised estate, certainly didn't have. But he certainly made use of that advantage in life through his ability, through charm, famously, and his wife as well. Lady Dufferin was an extraordinary person. In many ways propped him up and pushed him forward. But through charm, speech, his ability to win friends and influence people, people wanted to know him, and they wanted to have him on their side, you know, because he had that ability to embody some of the skills which I think a society like this is trying to embody in you. And his legacy is there. It's a complex legacy, like all legacies of the 19th century. He fought with Gladstone, he fought with Disraeli, he made his way through all of that. But, and incidentally, he didn't finish his degree. He dropped out after 2 years. But even then, he was in that aristocratic echo chamber of Christ Church College in Oxford, where the rich and powerful went, rather than Balliol, where the smart guys went, right? So even there, he dropped out, and he had all that advantage. Someone else dropping out might be finished. but because of the advantages he had, he wasn't finished. And he was able to leverage his own personal skills into all kinds of international and diplomatic relationships. So this award tonight is named in his honor, appropriately. And it's a connection with the ability to influence the world around you appropriately, which is what this is about. With all the humour and all the other rhetorical skills, hopefully we'll see some displays of critical ambition as well throughout the evening. Incidentally, I'm delighted that I thought there were about 6 people here. You know, I thought I was going to come along and meet like 6 intellectual apostles and pay reverence to you, but no, look at it. It's an explosion of intellectual greatness, comparable probably only to... I can see it. I mean, you don't even try to disguise it. I can see it. Comparable probably to, you know, the emergence of that philosophical impulse in the pre-Socratic Greek states. I see it. It's all here, and I'm really looking forward to the display of your intellectual wealth tonight. So, thank you very much. Get ready. This is the bit. This is the bit where I announce the motion. And then you will have 15 minutes to prepare. And we will all keep drinking until you come back with words of wisdom. Write it down. Here it comes. This house believes it is time for Ukraine to negotiate with Russia. Good luck. Good luck.
And then we'll do private members' business and the vote of priority whilst they're away.
Nothing about it.
Whilst they're away preparing, I believe they've got another. They have another 10 minutes exactly. We're going to do we'll do the vote of prior opinion first. Next one, please. Just to get that out of the way, and then until they return, and Misha's going to collect them. But when they return, we'll move on to the debate. But to fill the time, we'll do private members' business as well. So the vote of prior opinion, the part where you vote on the motion itself before you've heard any of the speeches, just to clarify, it'll be the only vote tonight, as the winners of the debate will be determined by our judging panel. But the motion being, this House believes it's time for Ukraine to negotiate with Russia. If you'd like to vote in favour of the motion, please raise your hand now. Here are you, Mia, right? That's okay. If you'd like to vote against the motion, please raise your hand now. And if you'd like to abstain on the motion, please raise your hand now. James. Quiet, please. Can we get the vote of prior opinion, please?
Yes. On the question at hand, there were 2 votes for the opposition, 13 votes for the opposition, 12 Alliance voters. So by about a West Belfast margin, the opposition has it.
We'll now turn to private members' business, which is the chance for the audience to put anything they've read in the news or anything they're interested in before the House. Have any pieces of private members' business, please? Adam?
While we have a non-biased BBC member here, I would like a kind of official recognition of the House's thoughts on France. I think France gets it all. I think France is very unfairly maligned a lot. They offer great wine, they offer great food.
Nice.
They
Quiet, please. There's a lot of Literific law and history coming out here, so I apologise to anyone new in advance. Max.
A wise man once said, "Give me France or give me death." I would like to rephrase that sentence. Give me death, please don't give me France.
Do you have any more pieces of prime? Blue.
Luke Anthony Patrick Maguire. David Starkey said, "All bad ideas are French. France is the philosophical cause of all our current woes. There is where Marx was educated in his horrid psychopathy. I hate everything that come out of that accursed land. Even my grandma said, please never go to France in your life because that's where the devil lives."
Thank you. Do you have any more piece of prime members' business that are not this, Tom?
I'd just like to follow on from Mr. Maguire's comments on the reticence of France. Knowing Luke as I do, I know he's a massive fan, surprising a lot of people. Luke is a massive fan of Les Miserables.
I know all the songs.
No.
It's like a real life affair.
This is not France related, so sorry.
It's a new piece.
I was wondering.
Quiet, please.
I was wondering what the House's feelings were towards the Super Tuesday results in the States. We all love a good grudge match.
Mr. Howie.
I think it's a great shame because I think that it's kind of like what we experienced in both 2017 and 2019, where it was both Trump, Jeremy Corbyn, where a huge amount of the electorate were completely disenfranchised and didn't feel that I was the super representative. And now the American electorate, having had the choice between Trump and Biden in 2020, are again to get the choice between Trump and Biden in 2024.
Trump and someone, isn't it?
Trump and maybe, Michelle Obama maybe. But yeah, no, it's a terrible shame that Trump is going to be the nominee.
Yep.
I just think it would be absolutely hilarious if the Supreme Court ruled that the insurrection was Trump's fault, because that would mean that it would be Biden with question mark as the opposition.
Yes.
James.
I just don't know my favourite aspect. This is when I woke up and saw that Biden is the first president in 44 years to lose a presidential primary in the great not state of American Samoa, where 91 registered voters who voted for some nominee, Palmer, is how he was described in MSNBC. And while he's not going to become the nominee, sadly, it is still interesting that he is the first president since Jimmy Carter to lose the presidential primary. The most recent president to nearly do this was Barack Obama, who nearly lost West Virginia in 2012 to a man who was in federal penitentiary. So people of West Virginia thought of Barack Obama. But I suppose the other point is that Jimmy Carter did manage to lose 44 states in the election. But he did manage to live another 44 years, potentially more, so I don't think Biden's going to be.
Thank you. No?
I just think it's going to be really funny if something, I'm not saying Biden dies, but something happens to Biden. Something happens to Biden and something happens to Trump, and they have to scramble really quick to
Keir and Jacqueline.
Wait, I have new private members business, so
Go for it.
okay. This is something I was thinking about a while ago. Every single stupid and wrong idea about the human condition, like antinatalism or anything Thomas Hobbes ever said, is fundamentally rooted in the idea, in contempt for humanity. So every single bad and wrong idea comes from the baseline that people are bad.
True.
We carry on with the previous
Speaking as someone who does hate most people, speaking as a bad person myself who does love to fight people for money in front of others,
Quiet, please.
What if you're just evil?
Do we have any more piece of private members' business? Sam.
Yes, I noted with alarm this week that BT have announced that this year's phone book is going to be the last ever to be circulated on paper, which, as anyone will know me, that knows me will know, this shocks me, it sickens me to my very core. I think this is a horrendous thing to do. One of the worst things to ever happen, I wonder if anyone agrees with me.
Adam?
Two things. Firstly, I believe this is partly because Rita is on the phone book, and secondly,
yes,
the French will never get rid of the phone book.
James?
I'd just like to make a point on context here about that Sam for our guest chair and for these two. Sam is something we wanted the university to provide having a working email address. Who decries the decimalisation of the pi, despite having been born after the year 2000. Is a man who probably would have been not felt right at home at the Salem witch trial. And he's not disputing any of this.
Thank you, character reference.
Max?
Alas, poor BT phone book, for I knew him well. I believe that this is one of the greatest tragedies to befall the UK as a general state, and I would further echo that France would never do this, because they already did. But equally, if we are stepping to the level of France on banning phone books, what have we become as a society?
Jacqueline?
As ex-president of wine and cheese, I would just like to say, France hasn't made good wine for at least 40 years. It's Australia and Chile is where it's at. France is in the past. Thank you.
A lot to do with BT.
I would like to point out that Australia and Chile don't make good wine, they make cheap wine. They make cheap wine for
Cheap wine is
No, cheap wine is not good. You trick yourself into thinking cheap wine is no wine. France makes the only good wine.
While we may hate France and
Quiet, please.
even though we
Quiet, please.
even though we may hate France and the French, we can at least acknowledge they do revolutions well.
No, they don't.
Very least.
Folks, we'll wait for Jack and Dermot, which they need to be back now. Let me just... Misha. Care. Quiet, please.
I think we should get rid of phone books, not because they're old and outdated, but because I think we should get rid of phones, period.
I'm somebody who don't roll
Quiet, please. We're gonna... I know, but...
I don't particularly have a horse in the race of phone book digital or no, but I do just want to point out, Sam had a genuine look of disgust as he was saying.
Folks, we'll give it a minute for them to come back, and then we will...
Oh, that's
That's minus points for me. Shall we do every minute a row if you just start taking points off? Oh, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
Punctuality's up there.
Exactly.
That's selling.
I'm dead serious. What is it?
I need to take it out, punctuality. I found the one that's
Didn't want anyone else hearing ideas. Huh? Didn't want anyone else hearing the ideas. You're only 3 minutes early.
I like
Folks, now we finally have everyone back. I'm just going to go over the rules this evening, which differ slightly from our normal chamber debates. So please do listen. Each speech is 7 minutes long, with the first and last minute being protected time. The end of the first minute and the start of the final minute of a speech, which will be the 2 minutes of protected time, will be signalled by the bell, which means you can only POI people in the middle 5 minutes. To POI, raise your hand and say point of information on that point, or simply POI. Keep your POIs to 10 seconds long, and you will be cut off if you go over this. And no barracking, meaning wait at least 15 seconds after giving a POI to give another one, or wait 15 seconds after someone else has given one. Once you've made your POI, you cannot go back and forth with the speaker. What differs tonight is only the people around the table, only the participants can offer POIs, and the audience must not attempt to offer a POI, interject, or make any other sound at any point. If you need to leave the room at any time, do so quietly between speeches. Do not leave or re-enter the room whilst the speaker is speaking. Remember that any noise from outside travels in, so whilst you're out there, keep the noise down. And lastly, no swearing. If a speaker swears, they'll be fined a bottle of port to be presented at the next oratory meeting. Without further ado, can I welcome the first speaker this evening to open the case for the proposition, Dermot Hamill.
That's Dermot Hamill, HLM to you. Thank you very much. This is very wobbly, isn't it? Let me first of all say it's a pleasure to be on my second debate today, chaired by Mr. Crawley. I hope this shall be more exciting than tuition fees going up. Let's make sure we oppose that. But again, it's a pleasure to speak in my first Dufferin competition. President, Fortune, Chair, thank you all for coming. Thank you for having me here tonight. And what I must say, it's obviously a very pertinent motion to the current state of affairs in the world. It's certainly an interesting one, and I look forward to hearing some of the interesting things to be said at the table tonight. But I first of all want to lay out my points. I'm going to deal with two issues. A post-war Ukraine, what that can look like, what that can mean for Ukraine, and also for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. And two, I'm going to talk about the cost of this war and what effect it has had so far, and what effect it would continue to have should the war continue. So we're going to deal with the second point first, because why be logical in this house? And I'm going to open with a quote, this time not from the Lord Carson, but from another political figure of the 19th century, Daniel O'Connell. Because he said, "The altar of liberty totters when it is cemented only with blood." And that quote sticks out to me, because we must ask, when we look at this war and the idea of the continuation of this war and what this war means, is how much blood is enough? How much blood are we willing to spill for land? How much blood is an inch of land worth? And when we ask that question, we can't put a figure on that. We can't say a pint of blood for an inch of land. We can't quantify it. We can't say how many human lives we ought to take for land, because that would be an absolutely abhorrent thing. That would be to place a single monetary, or in this case land value, on human life. And we simply cannot do that, not at least in a morally justifiable way. And that leaves very clear that the route for Ukraine to continue this war is simply inefficient. It is not possible and unacceptable. Because while yes, of course, we must condemn the invasion, the illegal, immoral invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we must simply also recognise that by continuing to spill more blood simply for land is not acceptable. To allow continued deaths of civilians, continued displacement of people, whether they be Russian or Ukrainian, is simply not something we can allow. 150,000 dead Ukrainians. 150,000. For context to those from the same part of the world where I am, that's 5 Nuris. Now, ignoring the fact that we may equate Nuri with humanity, that's 5. 150,000 people. And while the Nuri joke might be funny, we simply must recognize that is an absolutely stark and scary figure 150,000 people dead, and that is just on the Ukrainian side of this war. Jack will also discuss the importance of peace, the effects that it's had upon us here, and the effects of the war on refugees. Because there are also 6 million Ukrainian refugees displaced right across this world. Roughly the population of Ireland. Imagine every single one of us displaced, sent to live in a country that isn't our own, because we've had our homes blown up, because a foreign invading force has destroyed where we come from, where we live, where we call home. And that's simply not acceptable. So, the war ending is simply based off of the fact that it is time to stop bloodshed, to stop dropping blood for soil. Secondly, the war ending would allow Ukraine a much better place in the world than it has now, or than it had prior to the war. A wartime Ukraine will not be able to join NATO or properly join the European Union. By contrast, after the war, in one moment, after the war, Ukraine will be a shining example in the world, in Eastern Europe, to show Russia, to show any invading country, to show any country superpower that attempts to bring about conquest in the 21st century, that not only will the world stand against it, but also that it is simply intangible. After all, neither Russia nor Ukraine have made proper gains in this war. They are now currently locked in a stalemate. So simply put, it doesn't work. Conquest doesn't work anymore. We are not able to fight wars of conquest the way we could on horseback. Guns and bombs aren't going to bring that about. And a Ukraine that shows that standing up to a superpower is possible will simply be able to show that. I'll take Oren's point if it's still of any value.
Yeah. Will Ukraine still be able to join NATO if Russia did what it did in pre-2020 and have skirmishes on the border by funding terrorist groups whenever they have negotiations and say peace is achieved?
Well, the brilliant thing about that is if Russia is fighting a proxy war at that point, they would be able to join NATO, as has been pointed out by many world leaders, that they would be welcomed into NATO. And if they do join NATO at that point, well, I wouldn't want to be a terror organisation fighting in a NATO-ruled country. It doesn't work well, typically. But they will be a small nation that has just stood up to an international nuclear superpower that has built peace in Eastern Europe right under the block of the Soviet Union, the former Iron Curtain, and would show Russia and the rest of the world that conquest is simply not sustainable in Europe. So, listen, voting with the proposition tonight, standing with us on the side of peace, on the side of liberty, on the side of freedom, on the side of democracy, is very simple. It is siding with the ending of spilling blood. And at that point, what else is it worth? Ignoring whatever else is said tonight, we're talking about lives, we're talking about bloodshed. And how many of us are willing to see that continue to go on simply for the sake of soil? How much blood are we willing to spill for land? I say we should spill no more. I say I'm willing to give up land, but we ought not to. We ought to stand together tonight and stand for peace, stand for human life, and recognise the importance of that. Thank you very much.
Go on, Cormac.
It's back to me. Speaking now for the opposition, please welcome Cormac McSparrow.
Oh, Jesus, no. Thank you, Dermot, for starting a speech with a little bit of Daniel O'Connell. It's always a pleasure. I'm going to start with somebody just about the same level as him. A few months ago, Bertie Ahern said to me, and he said to me that he would not like to be in a world in which America isn't a big player. Unfortunately, it seems like Dermot would want to be in a world in which Vladimir Putin is a big player. And well, let's have a little look at what Vladimir Putin has done. It was only days before the invasion of Ukraine he said he wouldn't invade. I myself was surprised, even after Novichok and the paramilitary groups he's funded around the world, his relationship with Serbia, everything else, that, well, this man actually lied to us all, and he actually did send the tanks over the border. And it kind of clashes with what we've heard so far tonight about how negotiating with this man would further democracy across the world. And what has Putin's policy been about? What does it do? Whenever we were all questioning, and most people did say he wouldn't put the tanks across the border, he is in a process which is very similar to some of the Soviet tradition of keeping the West on its toes about what they're planning. And that's exactly what he has done. It's sort of a game theory. Whenever nobody thought that Khrushchev would really put the missiles in Cuba and potentially ignite the flames for a nuclear war, Putin makes us question nearly everything. And I do believe that if we were to... Sure, go for it.
How did that work out for Khrushchev?
Well, the West took their weapons away from the Russian border, you know. So actually, it did work. Nobody thought he was going to do it. Nobody thought he was mad enough to. I think JFK nearly had a heart attack because of it. And that's exactly the policy which has been done. And if we give in to that idea, that madness, that lets us actually wonder, what is this man going to do next? I can't see how that will further democracy, further the spread of a new beginning in which land is not seen. And this isn't just a war about land. You know, this is not like an imperial war in the traditional sense of being about land, labour and resources. This is about international power. In fact, it would be better classified as an intra-imperial conflict rather than an imperial conflict, because this really is a war between West and East. It's less so about the bodies on the ground in Ukraine and more about that. No, thank you. And allowing Russia to have this victory where it essentially can get its way by sending tanks across the border and 2 years later entering negotiations with this madman, threatens democracies around the world, allowing it to reach an armistice with Ukraine. What would that do in terms of good? Ukraine and its allies must aim to make Russia less anti-Western and essentially stop acting like crazy people all of the time. And if the Russian state is in its current form, this democracy or new world in which the pints of blood are not spilled is not going to be a possibility. Russia will not engage in serious negotiations. They were completely insincere days before they invaded. Russia's traditional imperial drive is too strong to allow for a meaningful and lasting agreement between itself and Ukraine and the rest of the world. I would think to say that anything else that we could somehow negotiate with this man. I think I actually visited Salisbury, I drove through it, and I was like, you know, this is where really Putin actually sent off KGB, or well, they're not called that anymore. They rebranded the agents to poison two men, and no, I wasn't on holiday in Salisbury either. So if Putin's listening, don't come after me. And you know, and I do think that we are pushing Russia into. We have pushed it in the question of its own madness. It's an oil-rich country which is now facing shortages. A third of its national defence budget, a third of its national budget is spent on defence. Now, if any of you are familiar with the collapse of the Soviet Union, what were they doing at that time? The biggest thing they were spending money on was defence. They can't keep up in a sort of economic battle between the East and West, which is expressing itself on the ground in Ukraine with 150,000 dead. No, thank you. And it's the same thing that's being repeated again. They just can't do it. They don't have the economy for it. Russia will itself have to... Well, the Ukrainians need freedom, and so do the Russian people. And change is the necessity for that freedom, and that change must come from internally. And I do think that people are questioning in Russia the validity of this regime. Where is it going to? Even Russia's elite, who have been Putin supporters for years, no thank you, have ended up dead or disappeared. You know, most countries, especially most of them in general, have multiple sort of elite groups. You can see it in Tory and everything else. And these elites will be competitive with inside Russia, and I do think that there will be a movement against Putin eventually. And to give in to this man, to let him be the one who decides democracy, to let him be the one who says that I can put a tank across the border and kill hundreds of thousands of people, who can make us all continually question whether or not he's going to link up with the Chinese, invade Taiwan, go anywhere else. I hope he doesn't come to Nuri anytime soon. But although you just say 5 Nuris being destroyed, whenever it's Nuri, it doesn't sound so bad as other places. And I can say that as a man from North Belfast, just like William Crawley. Sure, go for it, please.
How much blood are you willing to spill to allow for greater American influence?
Well, what Bertie Ahern did say was he doesn't think it's a bad world in which America has more influence. And I do think that these habitual wars, you know, look at Russia. I mean, even internally, they were at war with their own people, even their own territories disputed. Do you ever remember Chechnya, Dagestan, even their Moldovan thing in the 90s, which the Moldovans said it was worse than whenever they were under Nazi rule in the 1940s, you know? And to trust this habitual liar, these people, to not invade, that we can somehow easily end this via negotiations, simply only falls into and supports a long pattern of Russian behaviour. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. And now to continue the case for the proposition, Jack Steele.
Good evening, esteemed judges, Mr. Crawley, Mr. President, guest, and Dermot. I would just like to reflect on a number of points that were stated by Mr. McSparren, as always is the case. You talked about not negotiating with this man and kind of the Russian elites and the desire to change from within, which does somewhat sound like you're advocating military intervention rather than negotiations. But I don't think it's enough to simply say that we should just let change from within happen. I think that if you want to see change, it has to be enacted, and if you let a wound fester, it will get worse and it will spread much further. We need to negotiate a way that this wound can be remedied with a compromise that suits both sides, but that protects and upholds the people. My colleague has been very clear on the extent of this bloodshed. Hundreds of thousands of people dead. He's already mentioned that. He's already mentioned the size comparison with Muri. In the 1990s, mediation was a tool for peace. Today we see something very different in Europe, with fragile and limited ad hoc deals being agreed between countries or parties that are at war and want the elimination of the other, the ultimate destruction of the other. We saw this throughout the Cold War. Some of us here are old enough to remember. The Iron Curtain descended across Europe. And what happened in the 1990s was we forgot about Russia. We left it behind, left it in the cold. It's no longer even seen as part of Europe. It's seen as Russia and then Europe. This is what's going to happen unless we start negotiating again. We're going to isolate Russia, and you pave the way for tyranny. When you let people come in unopposed like Putin, that is precisely what happens. We need to take an active role in seeking a compromise. It's a depressing state of affairs that we're living through, most of us without even knowing, with a ruthless war waging each day, one of the most foulest that has been seen in the last 20 years. Clausewitz, in his realist way, said that war is merely a continuation of politics by other means. It isn't. Anyone here tonight, again not targeting anyone, but anyone here tonight who has had to live through war or conflict can attest to the fact that war is the most insidious form of mankind. It's brutal and barbaric. It's murder. It's murder. People are the biggest consequence of war. It's not the great dictators, the generals, or the politicians that suffer when you don't negotiate. It's people. The people of Ukraine will continue to reap this destruction of the war. They will be the physical and mental detriment. It only takes one Google search to immerse yourself in the horror of the Ukraine war. Full and complete displacement. There has been 6 million Ukrainian refugees displaced just in Europe since the beginning of this conflict, and there's been a further 8 million displaced within the country itself. That is a horrifying statistic. We are quite privileged to be where we are tonight, to have been through what this country has been through, and we've seen the cost, well, some of us have seen the cost of peace. Again, I don't mean to target you. Some of us have seen the cost of peace in this country. It was heavy. It was a heavy price to pay. It was sacrificial. It caused and required a surrendering of principles on most part. Look at David Trimble, Ian Paisley, Martin McGuinness, Jerry Adams, Seamus Mallon. These people, John Hume as well, these people had to...
On that one?
Yes, of course.
But the difference is, in Northern Ireland, there wasn't like breaking international law, and also the fact that Russia is the bad guy in the situation.
Well, I think that depends on a matter of perception on who the bad guy is. What we can all agree on is murder is wrong, and the point that I'm trying to make is that the price for peace is heavy. We saw how long it took here, but we know that compromise is the only way this place could move forward. We could have kept going the way we were going, but we realised, or they realised at the time, the leaders of the time realised that compromise was the only successful remit for progress in Northern Ireland. I don't want to talk the whole time about Northern Ireland, but I think it's a good example to us, a lot of us whom it touches quite personally and closely, that compromise is a virtue that is necessary in order to progress a society forward. Any pillar of democracy will rest upon compromise at some point, because otherwise you let room for extremists to take hold. But the refugee and immigration crisis that has come from Ukraine is not solely the principal detriment to people alone. There has been innumerable consequences. Look at economic consequences to these families. Not only are they displaced, they have no money to do anything. They can't work. They lack visas. I mean, some of us here will be here. If you're like myself, I have done a placement in a constituency office. I have seen for myself the raw emotion trying to get children and daughters to Northern Ireland. I have helped a mother fill out a form to get her 7-year-old son over here from Ukraine. I seriously think we need to consider the human condition in all of this. It is absolutely paramount. I'm reminded of the Sermon on the Mount, as I always am. You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. It takes a lot more strength and integrity in a person for them to be able to say, I'm going to lay down my principles. I'm going to lay down what I might think of you, and I'm going to say, let's do this for the long term. Let's put everything behind us and forgive. Let's move forward. That takes a lot, but the price is peace. How much bloodshed is enough to appease the warmongers of this callous world? How many families must we tear apart? How much destruction of towns and villages is enough? The dark and lamentable pages of human history are filled with examples of conflicts that ravaged this world. And always the consequence is people. It's always the consequence. We can have a peaceful Europe, a peaceful 21st century Europe. We can, as Dermot has pointed out, have peace in a way in which Ukraine can find itself in Europe, can find itself in NATO, flourish and succeed, and take up what should be the demands of a normal society. Welfare, potholes, being Bangor. These are important things. A harmonious and prosperous Ukraine is a benefit to us all, but I think Russia could equally benefit from some grace. And although Putin may not be the Gorbachev with whom Thatcher could do business, his time is ultimately limited. Isaiah 2:4, the Lord will mediate between nations and will settle international disputes. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer fight against nation nor train for war anymore.
Thank you very much, Jack. And now to continue the case for the opposition, Oren Graham.
Hello, presidents, plural it seems, chair, judges, my fellow speakers, and all of you unfortunate souls on the House tonight that have to listen to us all. Me and my partner will be making the case why we despise and go against the idea that it is time for Ukraine to negotiate with Russia. Now you see, the proposition are a bunch of Putinites sent from the Kremlin itself to make you end up giving into Russians' demands and see the end to the Western democracies across the world. Now, if you need proof of this, look no further than Dermot Hamill's wrist, in which he has a stamp from the Kremlin itself. In which he has been sent by those lot to listen to the commands of a tyrannical, crazy, and honestly, I think he's built like one of the thumbheads from Spy Kids 3, Putin. But on a more serious note, the proposition wants Ukraine to never be able to get back the land it lost and that the Russians have took away from them, such as in Crimea in 2014, whenever they took away the Crimean Peninsula. The proposition wants Russia to steal the Donetsk and Donbass regions and leave its people to defend themselves against the forces of the Russians and the tyrannical reign of Putin and see their rights and their basic liberties taken away. The proposition wants the deaths of those who have all fought valiantly and defended their country to mean nothing, and all the world's collective aid and American tax dollars to mean nothing at all. Poor American tax dollars. This House should detest the idea that we should give any consideration given into Russia and their abhorrent demands and giving up everything that's been fought for. As my partner has pointed out, any negotiation with Russia would be insincere and be with an illegitimate state that is ready to send tanks over the border at any given moment. We should never seriously consider sending a country to go negotiate with a maniac who is willing to kill political rivals such as the Salisbury poisoning, and who can never walk into a negotiation without playing games. Further, any negotiation would only end up being a loss for the Ukrainians, as they would see their territories part of the... Yes.
How much blood is land worth?
How much blood is in a human?
8 pints.
By 8 pints then. Further, where was I? Lost my point, sorry. Any negotiation would be giving up territory, would be giving up resources, as Basque and Donetsk regions are actually quite filled with what America loves, natural gases and oils. And Shell, oh my, Shell loves it. We, as the West, should fight against the idea of any negotiations with a man who is more insane than I think any previous USSR leader and is always playing games. Now, Dermot, I seem like I'm picking on you a lot tonight, and I'm sorry, but Jack Steele sounded too hippie for me, so I'll bite peas. So let's talk about the cost of war. The cost of this war will see if Ukraine ends up in negotiations preemptively, as it is now. It would see them losing land. It would see their homes being destroyed for nothing. It would see the valiant defense crumble away for a peace that would only allow... Yeah, of course.
Their homes will be destroyed. One of their homes will be destroyed for now anyways, and isn't that land already occupied by Russian soldiers that would be very bloody to try and take back?
Their land is occupied currently, but if they end up in negotiations, they'll never be able to get back their land, and they can never fully legitimately claim it back if they willingly sign it away and hand it over to Putin. The cost of war will see people giving up on land and defending their home. The opposition would like to see Ukraine fall, and it would like to see overnight it fall as other democracies have and become puppet states and ruled by tyrannical governments, and see people's freedom stripped away.
On that point, you know, I said that I really said I wanted a free and prosperous Europe that can work together harmoniously with Europe.
My whole point is that you can't trust a man who would send tanks over the border just like that, and he would end up eventually taking away the freedoms of the Ukrainians, never mind the Ukrainians who would end up having to live in what would now be Ukraine/Russia, as in back in the USSR, but less of. I'm running here. We should fight such ideas and fight back till Ukraine is in a much more stable position and have an upper hand in any negotiation, in which right now it doesn't have any upper hands. It needs backing from the West. It needs our support, and it needs us to understand that it is a democracy fighting to keep its people's right. It's a democracy that doesn't need to negotiate with such an illegitimate government that would kill political rivals within Salisbury Convention.
What more backing can the West give other than military intervention? You're suggesting a full land invasion.
They can give a lot more aid, and they can give a lot more weapons, as America has a full arsenal that they can willingly sell for obviously debt to the Ukrainians. Finally, the proposition tonight. I've lost my point. Sorry. So in conclusion, you should vote for the opposition tonight, because we don't want to see Ukraine give into the tyrannical demands of a madman, and we detest any idea that we should give into Putin and threaten Western democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Warren. And Now, can you welcome, begin the closing of the case for the proposition, Dan Wilson.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be speaking. Really, there's been a good debate so far, a lively debate. We shall touch on some of the points. But really, I'd like to begin off touching on what the first speaker said for the opposition, where he said, we must aim to make Russia less anti-Western. And that was his reasoning to keep fighting the Ukrainians. For the Ukrainians to keep fighting the Russians. Yes, stay at war and they will become less anti-Western. That's not how war works. They will become more anti-Western. They will harden their resolve against their enemy. They will, and that will come out further in this speech. In my speech, I will be touching upon how Ukraine militarily cannot win this, how Russian forces are adapting and improving while Ukrainian forces are becoming worse. My partner will touch on the Western apathy problem that Ukraine will be facing and the variety of issues that will happen militarily and strategically for Ukraine. And then I shall touch on, if I have time, some of the economic damages that Ukraine will suffer as it continues to fight this campaign. And my colleague will continue to talk on the pragmatic and moral costs of it as well. So to jump right in, let's look at this militarily in terms of Ukraine's perspective. On the hot bits of the front, the most intense bits of fighting on the Ukraine front, Ukraine can at best fire 10,000 artillery shells a day, artillery being the main killer in this war. The Russians can fire 6 times to that amount with ease. The Ukrainians are barely managing to keep up to the 10,000. In fact, in some of the hot areas at the front, they can barely maintain 2,000 to 5,000. It does depend on their supply. It does depend on that. Going back to how the West can support them more, the European Union failed to donate 1 million artillery shells last year to Ukraine. In fact, I want to give you an idea. By the February just passed, the European Union was supposed to lend Ukraine 1 million artillery shells. They could only reach about a third of their commitment by the end of it. No, thank you. So, to move on, by contrast, the Russians, while they are suffering economically because they're in a war economy, they have been refined other market buyers, the Chinese for their oil, as well as the Indians for their oil and gas. And this is allowing them to fund a war in which they are able to supply is the key to war. The ability to get the rounds down, be able to get the artillery down, the browns down. And Russia is outgunning the Ukrainians. On the other hand, let's look at the Russians themselves, strategically, doctrinally. That second aspect of warfare. We've touched on the physical, let us touch on the doctrinal and the morale.
Point of permission.
Yes.
Do you think a world in which Russia and China feel empowered to operate war economies together is really a good one?
No, I don't think it is, and I think this war is making that much easier and more likely for the Ukrainians. The longer it goes on, the closer their alliance becomes close-knit, and so that is why the war must end. On the Russian side, the assault detachment organisations was a development the Russians have recently come in. It's not necessarily historically new, but it is new for the Russian army during this war, and it's a sign of the Russian army adapting doctrinally to Ukraine's terrain. To give you an idea of how these work, these are small man teams designed to go into the thick lines of trenches in forestry blocks out in the Ukrainian front and clear those trenches. They work ahead of the main force, and they only work if they have troops of very high morale, that will to fight, that will to go in 3, 4, 5 man teams, storm that trench with aggression and passion and clear out the 3 rows of enemy trenches, 4 rows of enemy trenches, Ukrainian trenches within that forestry block. So whenever you talk about Russia's will to fight, I say that they are finding the men that are willing to fight in these detachments. These are men of high morale. These are fighters who want to fight, and they are finding those men, and they are achieving it. No, thank you. I must continue on. Ukraine does not have the economy for this. It is barely getting by with the Western aid, and in fact, as the Western alliance ups its aid to Ukraine, this is only allowing the Ukrainians to just about survive. The last Ukrainian offensive was fundamentally unsuccessful, gaining land. Now, granted, the last Russian one took severe casualties. However, it is that the Russians at least are able to have success. The Ukrainians have not had offensive success.
How does any of this relate to negotiations? How would that even play out?
Let me get round to it. Thank you though. He's right. He's bringing me back on topic, and how nice of the gentleman to do that for me. Because hopefully what I've been able to do is illustrate a bleak picture of Ukraine's current situation. That situation must be in the forefront of the House's mind whenever you vote tonight. That the situation currently is not a militarily favourable one, tactically, operationally, or strategically for Ukraine. And if you bear that in mind, what is Ukraine's best hope for survival? For not a full strategic victory, but for at least surviving the war. And its best hope is to try to get into negotiations, to try to save bloodshed on both the Russian and Ukrainian side. And the Russians could be eased into this because this is a costly war for the Russians nonetheless. While they can win it, this is a very costly war for them to win. So yes, while they may have to give up territories, the country that is Ukraine as a whole, the state, the people would survive. So far, there have been 151.2 billion casualties, roughly. Sorry, economic damage done to Ukraine currently. That's over the course of the past 2 years. Estimates project by some experts that it goes as high as 350 million if this war continues. Every month that this war goes on, Ukraine's economy, its infrastructure becomes worsened and worsened. It loses more people that will need to rebuild that. The longer this war goes on, the more people Ukraine loses, the worse this becomes. So Ukraine faces, to summarize, Ukraine faces the following. It will face some of the apathy and other issues that my partner will come on to. But as what I have talked about, it faces a bleak militarily situation on the strategic, operational and tactical level. Economically, this war is very damaging for Ukraine in particular. And with little hope of success on the military prospect, its best hope for survival for both its people, its economy and its state, and for being able to rebuild after this war, is for it to enter into negotiations with Russia now, before the Russians gain a strategic advantage that is too great for them to lose, for the cost of negotiation to be worth the cost of war. Thank you very much, and I hope the House will take the side of the opposition.
Ben, thank you very much. And now to continue making the case for the opposition, Ella Griffiths.
About blood is making me a bit queasy, I'm not gonna lie. But I want to talk about how war is more than just about bloodshed and land, which is what the proposition is so heavily focused on. But think about war. Think about war when it comes to your national identity, when it comes for standing up for a common good, when it comes for standing up for your country. Think about that. Think about the World War II posters that said, "I want you." Think about it. It is the country sticking up for what is right for itself. Dermot and Jack talked a lot about the bloodshed and a lot about, how much blood is land worth. But it is so much more than that, okay? I want to talk a bit about primary school for me, okay? I was bullied. Shock horror at that. Who would have thought someone who got bullied then ends up in a debating society? Don't see it happening. But when I was in primary school, I had a really, really nasty bully. I'm not going to name her in case she stalks me and I'm still kind of scared of her. But I had a nasty bully. She would not leave me alone. She pushed me off a bike. She chased me around the playground. She stole my cucumber. She made fun of my lunch. And then when I got to high school, it didn't stop. She pushed me in front of a bus. Okay? Yeah. I'm getting to something here, okay? When we, as a country, talk about negotiating with another country that has clearly done such harm to Ukraine, we are talking about letting the big guy win, okay? Imagine I never stuck up to my bully. It is insane that this is even a concept that we're talking about, because it is letting the big guy win. No, thank you. By negotiating with Russia, we are letting Russia win. We are saying to all those people that are being bullied throughout the world, don't stand up. There's no point. No, thank you. I also want to talk a bit about long-term and short-term cost. For those of you who don't know, I'm also a PPE student. Makes me even more insufferable. Great. But in economics, we have these things called short-term costs and long-term costs, okay? Now, I want to pitch this in the version of war. The short-term cost of war, I'm not denying there's bloodshed. We're losing soldiers, and it's terrible. But think about the long-term gain of this. I'd like to point out that before the war, Ukraine was actually had more progress in terms of LGBTQ rights than Russia did. On the other hand, Russia had an anti-gay bill. So I think by entering negotiations with Russia, you do somewhat limit Ukraine. You do stop seeing Ukraine have that progress. Also, think about what Ukrainians would tell their grandchildren and their ancestors to come if we enter these negotiations with Russia. And this is something that Talsha is going to touch on as well. We're dealing with Putin here. We're not dealing with some nice guy. We're not dealing with Paddington Bear or someone like that. We are dealing with Putin. Vladimir Putin, the man who will put his opposition in jail, the man that will poison people, the man that is not really looked at as the most friendly person in the world. He's not someone that you want to sit down and have a nice chat with. Can you really imagine how the negotiations would go between a small country and massive powerhouse Russia? What?
In the talks that have happened so far, both Sergei Lavrov and Zelensky have said that they've made progress in terms of the negotiations that's happened. So is it really a case of Vladimir just being awful, or are you kind of shying away from the fact that these could work?
I think it's, again, kind of, can you really trust Putin? Is he really a man of his word kind of thing? If you do enter negotiations with Ukraine and Russia, do you really think Vladimir Putin is going to stick to his promises? I mean, even in Russian local elections, the candidate has to be approved by Vladimir Putin. So really effective democracy as well. But that actually brings me on to a point. I don't think that Russia would set fair terms for a negotiation. He's not no thank you. He's not a rational leader. He's not a nice man. He's not someone who's going to be fair. And also, this is a war Russia is losing. No thank you. Putin himself has had to distance himself from his military failures. I don't think even Putin has faith in this war anymore. So I don't see now as the time to back up and give in and let the underdog lose, okay? This is the time that we need to let the little guy win. We need the West to further support Ukraine. We need to stand up for the small guy. I just think it would be a shame at this point in time to give up what has been so hard fought for. Ukraine still has control of 83% of its land, and that's not going anywhere. And I think that by giving up now, we would really be doing a detriment to itself. And like I said earlier, I want you to think about what ancestors would tell their grandchildren. Are they going to tell their grandchildren what?
If the war continues, there might not be grandchildren to tell those stories.
That's a good point. But on the other hand, if the war continues and we reach a good settlement, if Ukraine wins, then it's a success story for Ukrainians. They're getting backing. They've got billions in backing from Western aid, and even Putin not having faith in this war himself, by having to distance himself from his military failures, says a lot. And I think that, I really don't think this is something that we should be looking at seriously, is letting the small guy lose by negotiating with Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And now to close the case for the proposition, Luke Duffy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawley, for stooping so low as to come to a debate for a mid-tier Russell Group University Society. Thank you very much for coming down to this level. Mr. Secretary, no one has mentioned you in their opening speeches, so thank you very much, Mr. Flattery does work, by the way. President Toft, thank you. I won't say President Emeritus because I think once a president, always a president. So, as Ben mentioned, Ben referred to Western apathy. Now that is going to be a major problem for Ukraine because, Oren, you mentioned that Ukraine needs our support. So what happens when that support starts to dry up, starts to evaporate? We see now Western apathy with the war in Ukraine initially. I'm sure you all saw, if you're on Twitter, on social media, in March 2022, everyone had the Ukrainian flags on their bio, everyone had the sunflowers. Now, 2 years later, that support's drying up. A growing trend of America First isolationism in the US, where that would cause a lot of funding, a lot of that military support for Ukraine to dry up. So Ukraine can't win this war without the West. So what happens when when Western support starts to dry up? Jack also mentioned, he quoted Clausewitz, I'm going to quote him again, that war is a question of wills. So Ukraine may right now might have that will to still fight, but does the West still have the will to continue supporting it? I'm not so sure. Yes.
Do you think a lack of support means that we have to give in to Putin, and also we really want to listen to the MAGA hat wearing Trumpers, isolationists?
Well, we don't have to listen to them, but they are a force in American politics. So that force of America First isolationism will cause American aid to decrease if the America First isolationists get into power, if Trump is elected. So we don't have to like what they say, but we do have to take what they say seriously. Yes. So war is a question of wills, and does the West still have the will to continue funding Ukraine? We also have to remember that as the war is continuing on, Ukraine's image is suffering in terms of its ability to demonstrate victory, and so without demonstrating that victory, is the West going to continue to throw money? Yes.
Would you not say more people still support Ukraine over Russia?
Well, they might morally support Ukraine as justified in a defensive war, but would they extend that to their own pockets, to spending billions of public money that could be going to healthcare infrastructure in the West, sending it in the form of military aid to Ukraine? We have to remember that growing Western apathy, as Ben mentioned, is a problem for Ukraine, because the only reason Ukraine has been able to stay in the fight is because of the West, is because of the West military aid, both in the form of direct funding, in the form of the British Army training Ukrainian forces in England, in terms of Germany sending military aid as well, Europe, Britain, America, all sending military aid to Ukraine. So what happens when that aid starts to dry up?
Point of information.
Yes.
I don't see an emboldened Russia and Putin as. Sorry, I've lost the train of thought.
That's all right. Don't worry.
Very tired.
That's all right. Don't worry. Oren, you also mentioned giving up land. Now that is a key theme of this conflict. Well, are all the Ukrainians who are living in those eastern provinces, do they all want to be part of Ukraine, or do they want to be part of Russia? We have to consider that although Putin is unjustified in invading, that does not mean that the rights of ethnic Russians in those eastern provinces, in Luhansk, in Donetsk, that those legitimate aspirations of ethnic Russians to be part of Russia should be denied, even if at the same time we can of course condemn Putin's decision to invade. So that was a main cause of the conflict. Those ethnic Russians in those eastern provinces of Ukraine Should the border have been redrawn? Should they be included in Russia? And should that be part of negotiations to end this conflict? The Minsk agreements, we almost had a chance to recognise those rights, to recognise those aspirations of parts of Ukrainians in those eastern provinces who see themselves as Russian, whose identity as Russian, they speak Russian in their families, they identify with the Russian state, not with the Ukrainian state. And should there be, and we on the proposition are arguing that should be part of the negotiations to bring this war to an end, that the rights of those ethnic Russians who may be Ukrainian citizens but see themselves culturally, linguistically, in terms of their heritage as Russian, and that if we were to recognise that would allow negotiations to be facilitated. Dermot also mentioned the most obvious point of this conflict is at what cost do we continue it on? At what cost is the deaths, is the casualty figures of hundreds of thousands, and well, the Americans they're never great for casualty estimates, but they estimate between about 500,000 combatant deaths, Russian on both sides, Russian military and Ukrainian military. What is the cost of that conflict? We must negotiate, we must bring an end to this war. Jack mentioned the suffering of ordinary people. So if there is no compromise, if there is no negotiation, what is the alternative? Does the war continue forever? Do tens of thousands more people die? Does Ukraine suffer infinitely more destruction? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luke. And now to close the case for the opposition, Dulce McLaren.
Good evening, members of the House. This is the last debate of the night, and whoa, will it be last? So, me and Jack Steele over here are obviously very similar as people. So I'm also going to talk about the GFA a little bit. The GFA is something that, being from Northern Ireland, I am obviously very familiar with. A successful peace negotiation that has seen almost 26 years of peace in Northern Ireland. I think that we can all agree that striving for peace and stability and negotiating and talking to the other side is all a great thing in principle that most, wars should strive for. But in the case of the GFA and the other peace deals, we have to realise that this is an impossible country to appease without having Russia take over Ukraine and allowing Russia to continue to break international law. The proposition are allowing the bully on the playground to win, and like Ella did, I will tell you a little bit of a story of bullying. My little sister from Vola has had to start to walk a different way home because she has a bully. This bully is 12, from Vola is 18. That bit in Step Brothers where they have to walk a different way home. And just like in Step Brothers, what did John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell do? They helicoptered into that playground and they beat the shit out of those kids. That is what actually happens to the bully on the playground. The parents and the teachers step in and they punish that bully. Russia has broken international law. The larger countries in the world cannot and will not allow for appeasement. We must not give in. America are providing aid and soldiers. The world is rallying support for Ukraine. We cannot give in. I think that people in this debate forget that we are dealing with Russia, not a country exactly known for its fairness. They usually have... Yes, please.
Yes, we are dealing with Russia, and unlike the playground bully, the playground bully in this instance, to use your analogy, has a gun pointed at the child's head, can kill it, absorb it, and burn its body to the ground.
Yeah, well, something that I was actually going to go into a little bit later, and I think that Literific loves to talk about, is kind of the World War II Hitler analogy. We did not give in when it came to Hitler because we knew that he was doing overwhelming bad. We are looking at a country that is trying to take over a smaller country, that is trying to gain more power in the world. It won't stop Ukraine, let's be honest. So we have to rally the world together and stop Russia. We cannot just allow it to negotiate, to appease Russia, and to let it take, but if you give it an inch, it'll take a mile, basically. Anyway, Russia usually has one candidate for election, who is Putin, and every governor who runs also has to be supported by Putin, as Ella also said earlier. Russia was completely insincere to Ukraine before they invaded. What actually makes you think they will change? The majority of Russians do not support the war. It is the corrupt politician, Putin. We cannot give in to him. Politicians go... Yeah, sure.
So if we're not going to give in to the guy that has control over all of Russia and its military and its nuclear weapons, are you suggesting we just let Ukrainians keep dying in a war that ultimately, according to every national security expert in the world, is
10 seconds.
No, I'm not suggesting that we just allow Ukraine to be completely wiped out. I think that the world has enough aid and it has enough military power to step in and to help Ukraine. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Russia is already losing it in a lot of parts. 83% of Ukraine is still owned by Ukraine. This is a war that we can win, and appeasing to them will just, what I said earlier, if we give Russia an inch, it will take a mile. It will not stop with Ukraine. It will just try gain power. And as we can all agree, Russia is bad because politicians go mysteriously missing. They get poisoned. They get shot from planes in the sky, and oh no, they can't run for elections anymore. And also, Dermot, you said earlier that Zelensky was saying the peace deals were going well. Zelensky has said that he won't go into any peace talks that involve Putin because Putin is simply a bad person. We cannot give in to him. No, thank you. Well, I already mentioned Hitler, so I'm not going to mention it. Actually, no, I am going to mention Hitler. Point of clarification I have to take, yeah.
According to the New York magazine, Zelensky says that, according to New York magazine, Zelensky said that the talks involving Sergei Lavrov and their ideas for peace were seen as realistic.
Well, according to the source that is probably in the search history of my phone over there, Zelensky said that he would never, ever again enter a peace talk while Putin was in power in Russia. So it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, because it shouldn't happen anytime soon. And yes, when it came to Hitler in World War II, yes, there was bloodshed, but history has shown, and the present shows, that we must not allow for the big bullies in the war to kill, own, and negotiate in whatever way they want. Because when we... Sure.
Has Hitler's earliest regime not demonstrated us that negotiations must be ensured to protect the sanctity of human life?
I think that, no, I don't think it demonstrated that to us at all, because imagine trying, it's like, what I'm saying is, imagine trying to negotiate with Hitler. He was not stable, he was not mentally well, it's never going to happen, and it is completely the same in the case of Putin. This is not someone that you can negotiate with. You just have to not give in to him and try fight back in whatever way you can. And also, what would Ukraine actually look like with a negotiation? Ukraine would lose its sovereignty, its national identity, and control over its own destiny. Currently, Ukraine controls 83% of its territory. How much will it have to lose if we negotiate with Russia? Do not jeopardize Ukrainian autonomy, because let's be honest, Russia will not give in until it owns every Ukrainian land. They will have the confidence to take more after that. So we should not give in to Russian rule. Do not let the bully on the playground win. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all those fine speeches. Can I now invite the judges to leave the room to deliberate and decide on the winners of this evening's competition. Misha, if you wouldn't mind taking them over to the PFC, that'd be fantastic. their seats, please. We're going to continue. Can I now welcome the guest chair, William Crawley, to give some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm supposed to comment on what we've heard tonight, aren't I? That's pretty much it, isn't it, right? Oh, how the standards have improved since my day. All right, I'm going to walk through some of these speeches and also make comments about the proceedings and some of your rules, which probably should be changed, but we'll get to that. First of all, Dermot, how much blood is enough? Started us down a path, a motorway, to Newry. And the debate didn't really recover from Newry, did it? 5 times the size of Newry. How many times will I hear that tonight as I struggle to fall asleep, Dermot? But there we are, we got an image, and then after the war, Ukraine can join NATO, Dermot. That struck me as very strange, logically, that Russia would participate in negotiations resulting in the very thing they went to war to resist, which is Ukraine joining NATO. I thought you might have gone for that line. I thought you might have intervened to point out the logical incoherence of that opening statement, which was driven through the opening speech. So Russia invaded Ukraine to resist NATO incursion and would then negotiate its way out by accepting NATO membership. Interesting. You got away with it, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Guys, you were so focused on getting to Newry, you were asleep at the rhetorical wheel.
I think it was just me with people on Newry.
He passed it by you. All right, there was a real opportunity there to go for it. Cormac McSparron then got up. Good response in real time, I thought, asserting that you're putting the big player with these negotiations and that negotiations have to be based in trust. It isn't just a war about land, which is the initial point, but the portrayal of the democratic resistance movement in Russia, waiting, bubbling away there, waiting to rise. Oh, I thought you might have got away with that as well. I would have intervened. Wouldn't you? You tried, but you wouldn't take it. All right.
I took 2 years, I swear to God.
Jack Steele. What can we say about Jack Steele? A name that invites a Netflix series. Poised, clear-voiced, eye contact with the room throughout it, sharply dressed, even with the pocket flourishing. Before our very eyes.
Do you like one? I have to say.
Strong opposition to war, I thought, Jack. Very impressive performance tonight. I couldn't work out if Jack was a pacifist. He seemed to sound like a pacifist at times, and I would have intervened and asked him. I would have, if you could get away, but intervening him, ask him. He then did an intervention about international law. He batted it away and then got us to a Northern Ireland analogy, which again I thought was ahistorical. Northern Ireland was not a war between two states. And then the Sermon of the Mount came in and it reappeared again as though Jesus was for appeasement. Jesus, who once said, "I came to bring a sword." Could have used that line. There was a lot of Bible here, wasn't there? There was a lot of Bible from Pastor Steele. But the first principle of communication is know your audience, and this don't look like a gospel hall to me. So, I mean, if I had only 3 quotations in one speech, and they were all from the Bhagavad Gita, you'd gotta hope you're in a temple and a Hindu temple at that, right? So I don't know what this room's like, but they're all drinking Jack. So I'm not sure. He turned water into wine, and it wasn't enough of this group. Then Oren, it's Oren, yeah?
Yeah.
Was up next. Best joke of the evening. The Kremlin stamp. Yeah. Fantastic. I wanted to pause. I wanted to rewind. I wanted to hear it again. Right? Great line. Fantastic. I would slow down a bit in your delivery, and then I would propose a change in your standing orders to ban laptops from podiums. You invited me. I'm allowed to say what I like. I'll tell you why. Because it kills your eye contact, right? It pulls your head down. You lose your place odd enough more easily with a laptop than when you're not using notes at all, or when you're using a bit of paper. It's easier to negotiate speeches with paper still than it is with a laptop. And phones. People bring out phones and use speeches, kill speeches every time. I would ban it. I would literally ban it for everybody. Just change your standing orders. I'm going to make an argument using Oren's performance for banning it, which is, and I was looking very carefully because I pay attention to communication, the strongest parts of your speech were your asides. When you looked away from the laptop, and at one point you went like this, strongest part of your speech. And you delivered a couple of offside comments, which were powerful, well delivered, not relying on the laptop. I also thought it was really interesting that you were the most thoughtful engager with interventions of the evening. You paused. Actually thought, Jury. Took a couple of seconds. Didn't look weak to me, looked thoughtful, looked respectful. And then gave a reply. So, hats off to you for doing that, because I like interventions. But I think in debating societies and in parliaments and assemblies, there's a certain etiquette to interventions. Some, for example, some might say, "Wah," right? That's what. One way of doing it. Others might, I'm going to give some examples of some really good use of interventions tonight. Ben Wilson, immediate engagement, very good. Linking and signalling the case that was coming forward, almost like an essay plan. I'm going to do this and this and this. My partner will do this and this and this. I was always taught in A-level, if you're writing an essay and you don't know what you're writing about, always enumerate. First, second thought. First, second thought. Have you done this? Always sounds like you know where you're going because you've got 3 points, even though you're still thinking of the second point while you're delivering it, right? So it's a knack. It's a trick. It worked very well. You did have a plan, though. You weren't bullshitting. You actually did have a plan. But you got lost in your plan. You were powerful in your responses to interventions. And this was, I think, the best use of interventions of the evening. Because what Ben did, as I saw it, was take the intervention, then thatch it into the speech. Rather than be paused as if you've stopped me, discard it. Now, where was I? But rather thatch it into the speech and keep going. I thought it was a really strong approach to interventions. You had a dismissive intervention, bring me back to the motion. Do you remember that bit? Where he was dragging you back to the point. And curiously, given that you were the most direct approach to signalling in the way that you laid out your speech, you got a bit lost at the end. Or you don't think you did?
Do you think so? Then I failed.
No, I don't think you failed. No, I don't feel that. I'm just here to do what they asked me to do. But I thought movement was terrific. I thought this can be very difficult. Because if you move around a lot, it can look a bit confusing. It can look like you're a bit... Or if you move around in a different way, it can look like you know where you're going. So it can go either way, that one. If you stand like this, perfectly still, like... it can be intimidating if you did what you did earlier and had at one point your hand here and moved here and leaned in for a point. I thought it was very strong positioning. So I'm not criticizing here. I'm simply saying the room will decide whether you're making them feel nervous or whether they feel like you know where you're going and they're going with you. Ella Griffiths. Hi, Ella. Buoyant, fun, energetic. The description of your childhood bullying in front of a bus. What the hell happened with the bus? Threw you in front of a bus?
Do you want the story?
How are you here?
So she'd someone who'd gone to my primary school and my secondary school, and I was getting off the bus one day, and the bus was reversing because my bus stop was like by the corner. The bus was reversing around the corner. She pushes me in front of the reversing bus and goes, "Ha ha, roadkill," which. I did what every 11-year-old does and then rides on it to my t-shirt.
Todd?
Was you really whiny coyote?
You know, there was a slight problem for me in that the minute you said push me under a bus, I was still on the bus for the next 2 minutes. I mean, what the hell happened with the bus was in my mind, the whole thing. But roadkill, wow. Which prison is she in at the minute?
Actually, someone else from my high school got convicted of murder. Not her, surprisingly.
Love it. All right. I actually want to do an interview with you. But anyway, you were very strong on saying this was a key point. How do you even negotiate with that man, with that bully? Not a rational leader. There was an intervention about Sergei Lavrov, and the Lavrov thing seemed to come back twice tonight. Lavrov, I guess the obvious response to Lavrov is he would say that, wouldn't he? And also he's making it up.
Yeah.
And somebody else, I think, Googled this on their phone to discover that Zelensky had already dismissed this as not true. Are you allowed to Google on your phone when you're preparing speeches? They do it in the House of Commons, so why shouldn't you? Yeah, absolutely. I do it on air. I'm not criticising, I'm just wondering what your rule is. And then, do you remember that beating fist downward that you did at the end? I thought, oh my God, she's drilling Putin's head into the ground now. She's just like, I thought it was very powerful. And then you made the reference about the 83% of the land, and the intervention style I thought was quite interesting. Wow. So I would encourage you to thatch in interventions, all of you. Look, Duffy, by the way, you didn't expect me to give you this full-blown analysis of everything, but here I was sitting there, I had to do something, Judge Judy's not on, so. Jokes to begin with, look, the 3-point stance. 3 point, 1, 2, 3 in the pocket, right? I don't know about the rest of you, I thought that was good, I thought that was strong, nice and poised. I think you dwelt on it too long. Your hand was in there too long. What was your hand doing? I don't know what your hand was doing. You were worried about your keys. You were worried about your money. I don't know. But it was a good, strong stance. So when someone does that and talks to the room and they're not looking down, the room tends to go quieter, doesn't it? And people kind of like, here's a fixed point in front of me. So I thought that was quite interesting. You seem to fade out some sentences and then return to the main point when you said, for example, the West is giving up. The intervention style seemed to be, yes! Here's a guy who likes an intervention. I thought, wow. Take a point, yes! Like that. So, keen on interventions. You switched into a Kremlin talking point at this point. Ethnic Russians have a right to be part of Russia, the Minsk Agreement. In other words, part of the negotiation, you even said this, part of the negotiation that you're championing must be to allow ethnic Russians to break away. Before you even have the negotiation, opportunity guys, opportunity, before you even have the negotiations, you've given it all to Russia. No wonder Sergei Lavrov is on your phone and was buzzing you in your pocket while you were standing here. And then Tolcha McSparran. The bullying then returned, right? Very funny. I thought it was very funny. I mean, you've got natural comedic skills, which really are not everyone has these skills. And it was really impressive to see it. You can develop those. But then you switched from that funny gathering up of the room to we cannot give in, and it became really quite serious. To switch so quickly can be very powerful. I think you demonstrated it. With interventions, I think you interrupt yourself, don't you, with interventions? You're making a point, someone intervenes, you stop yourself and then let them interrupt. Don't let them interrupt you. Finish your point, then be in control, take the intervention, you're in control. The choice is not to negotiate versus Ukraine dies. I thought it was a really powerful argument. The choice is appeasement versus fighting back with Western aid. And that kills the Lavrov point, of course, as well, as it goes. So I was really quite impressed by so many things tonight. Each of you had so many different things to contribute to the thing. I don't envy the judges at all, because they're going to have to pick through all of this and put points on it and decide which side wins. Do I keep stalling? Can we keep talking? She's like, I keep looking at you, Daniel.
You can move to questions if you'd like.
Questions? Not for me?
No,
that'll be fun. No, listen, I'm up for questions. Thank you very much. Best wishes to you.
Thank you very much for that. And I think for me, sat as who watches the debates but doesn't speak in them anymore, it was very interesting to hear a professional analysis of speeches. I think that what we try and do is a lot of our training happens in-house. We send speakers off to competitions, and then speakers who have been around the longest will then help build up our newer members, and that's mainly, I think, because for quite a long time the society didn't have the resources in order to have kind of a real professional analysis of speakers and help build them up. So it's absolutely fascinating to hear that. So thank you very much for that. That was fantastic. I know all the speakers
here. Do you think I could make an ad here at this point?
Of course. No, of course.
The Imagine Festival is on this month in Belfast, and I'm hosting, as part of that, the art of political speech making with a number of politicians, including the Deputy First Minister, will be on the stage with us. And please come and join us when we talk about speech making.
Fantastic. I think that's absolutely what speakers need. I know in my first debate, I was terrified of speaking. I can only speak for myself. I don't know how everyone feels. I was kind of sat there, and after you do a speech, you sit back down and you are worried that you have either delivered it poorly or delivered it wrongly. So it was really interesting for me, as someone who now stays independent, to hear the professional analysis. And I think it's something the society is looking more to. On the Imagine Festival, the society is also partnered with the Imagine Festival, and we'll be having a debate in the Great Hall on the 21st of March on the retention of the British Overseas Territories. We'll also share your event more widely with our members to make sure they're aware of it. So we'll send an email round to everybody, and we'll put it on our social media, your event, to make sure as many of our members can get along to that as well. Now, I'd like to turn to questions just while we wait for the judges to return. So just how this works is we have questions for the proposition, then the opposition get to respond, then the proposition respond, and then abstention questions which must be put to both sides fairly. So do we have a question for the proposition, please? Ryan.
Based on the proposition speeches, on what basis does Russia have any right to retain any territory over Ukraine?
Proposition.
It's not necessarily that. So there's a few ways of approaching this. I mean, part of it is a pragmatic argument coming from us. So I'll address that, and then I'll give you sort of the argument we were also going for. So there is a quite a lot of academic literature that will point out that strategically speaking, this is the door. Ukraine is the doorway from Russia to Europe and Europe to Russia. There's historical importance as well as strategic importance. So there's elements of that need to be considered, particularly if we are looking at the Russian perspective, which if you don't want a perpetual war, you have to take that into perspective. However, thinking myself and first look at our main point were a pragmatic point, that you may have to give up the predominantly Russian ethnic areas, which they already have troops in, and that means that or many people not want Russian troops are inside them. So there's that issue. If Russian troops are over there, it's going to be hard to get them out, even with military means or with peace negotiation. So you might have to give those up. But that's a bargaining chip that you can use as Ukraine for the successful negotiation. And that was really our pragmatic argument on that, which is you've got quite a useful bargaining chip there, and it would be too painful and too costly to try to gain that back.
Opposition to respond?
I don't know what the question was.
Brian, could you repeat the question? You don't. Oh, see, I don't want to get into my personal beliefs, but to go back to a theme from today, as Bertie Ahern said, Ben, you're a waffler. A waffler.
Is that a response? Quiet, please. Can we have a question for the opposition? We'll go with Kira.
Part of the debate tonight was about the fact that so essentially, it helps me concentrate. I'm very sorry. But basically, just the thing was this argument that, which I understand to a degree, that there is some support for Ukraine on the moral kind of standpoint because, let's face it, the West doesn't really like Russia very much. But one of the main issues is I do think fatigue is setting in. For example, this was mentioned on the other side, but examples were not used because to be quite blunt, you guys didn't have time, and that's fair enough. So I'm going to put in examples. One of them is the fact that currently in the US of A, the Republicans are...
We'll just...
Yes, we realize you don't know what to do now. The Republicans are holding back support for a bill of support on Ukraine because essentially they think it's too expensive. The second problem is that EU as a whole is very, how do I put this, wary of getting too involved. For example, the French President Emmanuel Macron basically put out a statement that made the whole...
Is this going somewhere?
Emmanuel Macron basically said, oh, we will do anything to make sure that Russia didn't win. And the entire EU basically went, oh no, dude, don't listen to him, he spoke out of turn, promise we're not going to put troops on the ground, we promise. So how do you respond to this need to keep support for Ukraine?
Just fast forward about 20 minutes further on.
Let's face it, we all get bored of the news every 5 minutes. This is the question.
So, for those following along, we'll get the telefax up in a little bit. Just for a second here, just like General Al Haig, I am now in charge. Yeah, that is a reference. That's a reference with 4 people here got. So, there's one of you. There's one of you suckers want to try and answer this.
It's the opposition. Yeah.
That is the opposition. Just say yes or no if you.
Would you like to?
It's not good.
And Mr. Doormat, yep. Yeah, whatever.
Can I first of all welcome all of the ancient people? I don't know about the present of the maritime.
I'm still here, it's Rhonda.
All of their joints. All their joints still work.
But I think that was kind of a fundamental part of our argument, is the fact that the opposition, God help them, talked a lot about all of the aids that we should just keep sending Ukraine, but didn't really talk about where the aid would come from, because as we've seen, the UK is in recession, The EU doesn't want to send any more money and didn't make the targets and legal what aid last year. The US aid is going to start dwindling massively when Trump is back in, and that's going to be a fun time for international affairs. I can't wait to see more mental things said in the White House compared to this kind of stuttered things. It'll be a good time for political oratory. So yeah, I think it's very clear that fatigue is playing a big part, because nobody really seems to give a fuck about Ukraine anymore.
So, so for everyone else here, oh, here we are.
Folks, thank you. Quiet, please. We now have our verdict. The three judges have gone over all the speeches and have produced winners. But before we get to the winners of tonight, can I start by thanking our three judges, all former presidents, for coming back to the society. Can I thank our fantastic guest chair for kindly agreeing to chair. Without further ado, I pass to our guest chair to announce the winners of the annual Dufferin Competition for the best speaker of the House.
I'll get the names right. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to our judges, our lovely judges over here who did all the hard work. So we have these wonderful trinkets. Oh my goodness, those are quite nice, aren't they? These little Queen things. Yeah, absolutely. They're really lovely. I got one of those years ago, but there was no colour in it. It's definitely an upgrade. I think Queen's bought about 10,000 of these, and they just give them to everybody that... No, I'm just kidding. No, they're very special. All right, so the Shannon Award first, and this is going to be shared tonight by Ella Griffith and Culture McFarlane. But then we come to the Dufferin Award and the Dufferin Prize. What is the Dufferin Prize?
Well,
it's just this.
There is that, and then
you can't give them the same prize as the Shannon Prize.
I'm afraid, and in the Conversazione, the Dufferin winner is also awarded the medal.
You get a medal at the Conversazione, so you have to go. You have to go. Plus 2 business class tickets to Quebec City, so you can walk along the Dufferin Terrace. Please welcome to the stage with enormous applause the winner of this year's Dufferin Prize, Ben Wilson.
What a surprise.
Don't use your phone, it says...
Well, no, actually, I've brought this up for one specific reason. So I sort of did this last minute. I sort of started doing debating. Some of you only know I started doing this recently, but I have tremendous fun with it. What I have to say is, a wee story for you guys tonight. Earlier on, just after I left the lecture at 5, there was a postgrad thing, which I snuck myself into with a lot of free wine, drank it. I hadn't eaten anything all day. It all went to my head. Now here comes the important bit, because I have to thank His Excellency, after doing all that good speaking, my tongue has left me. His Excellency, the Ambassador for the Republic of Korea, Mr. Yoon Yuchul. The reasoning being, he did a speak and he brought along food, and that food sobered me up.
Thank you very much. That was an absolutely fantastic evening. I hope we all enjoyed. But for the final time, can we have a round of applause for our guest chair and our judges? Can we have a round of applause for the winners of the Shannon Award? And can we have a round of applause for the best speaker of the House of the 175th session of the Literary and Scientific Society, Ben Wilson? Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next week.